a good trick for any of you who own this with that type of oil gauge is don't let the arm go up against the peg. Leave a little bit of room. And then when you look at it, if it ever is back on the peg, you know, how did that happen? Well, it could be because of coolant got in there. So, you know, always leave a little bit of a gap there. And then the other thing you can do is you can kind of, you know, flick it with your finger and see how it responds. Just see if it moves. Okay. Yeah.
What kind of float does it have in it? Is it like
there's
a copper?
A cork float, and then there's a series of little linkages and arms. Well, that's Rolls-Royce, you know? Yeah. So, you know, instead of just having the dipstick. So I have seen it where, you know, a guy would just put a dipstick in the side. You know, he wouldn't trust it. He drills a hole and puts a tube in and gets a dipstick from somewhere. So, you know.
Well, it's located like on my 20. You can't read it anyhow. It's in a spot you can't see it.
Right. You got to open up that, and really look down.
So leave a little bit of room.
Right.
So it's not right against it.
Right.
Well, there's like, you can even get gas back in a crankcase if you don't turn your gas off.
Right, right. Yeah, you could have.
There's a lot of stuff that go in there.
Right. So that's, you know, just something that I've learned over the years is.
And if you move that back and forth, it should play and then go right back to where it's supposed to.
Yeah, it should, you know, kind of have a. If it stays one spot, then you know something's going on in there. Another thing that can happen is if it's drained and then sitting for a long time, the cork can get stuck down at the bottom easier. Whereas if it's floating up on something, then it tends to.
So it's just a schlacked cork.
Yeah. Yeah. Go figure.
And how long do those last? I mean, those corks last a pretty long time, or?
Oh yeah.
Do they?
Yeah, a lot of them that I see are the original ones.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Well, they used them in float bowls.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
With gas. So.
Right.
Yep.
So you get too much alcohol in the gas.
Now. Yeah, there goes your slack.
Yeah, Tim, is ethanol causing a problem when I'm sticking, maybe?
On what? On the
ball?
It could. I haven't had too much of a problem yet. What happens is if it sits and it had ethanol around it, then it can have some degree of stickiness that can get there. There's times that I've had a problem one way or the other, and you'd have either a bad vacuum leak, which you can easily detect. You'll hear it or see it.
It runs like,
Yeah, yeah. So I like to take things off in as big of pieces as possible. Whereas some people may keep taking off little pieces. You know, if you can take something off in a larger piece, I'm sort of cheating here a little bit with this one. Actually, somebody had broken this. So, yeah, look at that. I guess we'll have another little project.
Well, that's going to be a problem, right?
Yeah, well,
Could be.
could be welded, so. Yeah. It doesn't look all that fresh.
Wow. So they just stuck it back on like that?
It seems like probably.
Hope for the best. Super glue.
Yeah, well, it didn't even attempt that.
Wow.
It wouldn't.
Maybe that's why it's not working.
If it's been open like that the whole time?
Yeah, you would think. I don't know but
You can weld that
Did
up,
it
though?
just happen?
yeah, you know, the aluminum that they use,
It looks real crisp.
yeah, welds usually fairly nicely.
You can clean
So,
it.
it's getting it clean because a cast aluminum absorbs oil, and then as you go to TIG weld, you know, you'll see this oil welling out at you, and the weld just. But you know, if you give it a good cleaning up and all, it's nice that way. Whereas you know, normally I think their castings were very close to pure aluminum, whereas you know some of the cheaper companies might have mixed in zinc and you know all other sorts. That stuff's a lot harder to weld, but this stuff normally. I've had to do a fair amount of welding on them, and it usually goes pretty well.
Let's see what it looks like from the back.
Oh, that whole thing
yeah.
just, that's the only thing that really holds it up. I'm just gonna, you can take this crap out.
But that part wouldn't be available, you would have to weld that.
Right, it is completely not. Yeah, I mean, you might get lucky and find a used one somewhere.
Check the Morrison stuff.
Right, we do
What's
have.
that?
The
Yeah.
Morrison parts, I bet you there's one in there, at least one.
One of the
The guy from South Carolina that has a gazillion.
No, this is, the foundation just got from California, what was it?
Okay.
From California.
one of the benefits to the foundation with this car is that there's a complete 2530 chassis, running chassis in the back, and it came along with a whole stash of parts. I guess somebody parted out another chassis, so it may be that there's one of these back there.
See how that's going.
Phil, has there been an inventory yet of the Morrisons?
They're working on it.
We're working on it.
And so that's always a good
You want me
comforting
to
thought.
hold this?
We're starting to photograph all the parts.
It's
Why
a
is
comforting
this
thought
double-
that maybe there's a part back there
Double,
that'll fit.
cast.
That was a breather passageway.
Oh, so it came back in?
Right, crankcase ventilation. So whatever ventilation, whatever heat and vapors were coming out of the engine were going out there, and then they also mixed in whatever leftover fuel was.
So how does the gas prevent it from going back? It just wants to go this way?
Yeah, yeah.
But if there's an opening between the two.
Right, there it is, yeah.
So this would be important not to get clogged up with that.
Right, right.
Hoover makes these, right?
That's what it looks like.
Maybe that's why it broke.
So what we'll do is put this in a little bag. So if I have any willing volunteers to bag, I have a little thing of bags here, and then in our.
You want this down on the floor?
Yeah, that'd be fine down there. So one of the neatest things I've found recently are,
Wow.
Ooh, push.
Tracking the Sharpie.
and you get them in all different colors.
Push. Next thing for the.
Don't have to take the damn cap.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Use
lose
the
it.
cap.
Or forget it,
Probably
put it
why
in
they-
your shirt.
Or you put in your,
I
is that
just
why
bought
you have
the,
so much
oil
ink down
filler.
there?
Yeah,
That's probably why they invented that thing.
The standard ink spot.
right there.
See what the doctor said.
Yeah.
Now, Tim, if we're changing the coolant, we want to make sure it gets out of the engine. Where are the plugs?
You'll have a drain
Those three need to be put up.
Might wanna go back in there.
coming off of this pipe,
Okay.
and that's the lowest part of the
And that'll,
system.
that'll sump everything out?
Yeah,
Okay.
Where's
yeah.
that?
It would be on the pipe that connects the water
Oh, on the
pump.
pump?
Yeah.
Okay.
What I like to do is get a gauge on where the last guy torqued the cylinder head, just to get a general idea.
Which should those be torqued?
It should be between 18 and 22. 20, and that would be foot-pounds. 20 would be okay. If they start feeling mushy at 18 on me, then I leave it there. But if they feel good and strong, I'll go up to 20, and and if they're fairly new, really healthy stud, then 22. But it doesn't take much after 22 before they really let go. So
20 is a safe number.
yeah. It seems like whoever did it had it on a really low setting. So. And that's even at 15, so.
Well, it's less inertia to loosen it than it is to tighten it.
Yeah.
So now we have an indication that somebody didn't, really kill them.
Good thought.
Yeah.
If he was being that cautious here, maybe that portends well for the future of this project.
Let's
We'll
hope.
hope so.
Those were all talked about 15.
Retorquing, you want to do in a pattern starting in the middle and then working your way out to keep things going down evenly and allow the gasket to settle in. I don't necessarily do a pattern untorquing. These are really loose, I mean.
What setting do you have that at, Ernest?
15.
So if they're that loose, is that a problem?
Well, it's not a good thing. It might have been that they actually did have this engine running. So after you initially get an engine running, you don't run it for a very long period of time, but then you retorque the head again, which involves taking the rocker back off,
Okay.
and then, if you're using, this is one of the old style head gaskets because it has, you can see the asbestos white stuff right there. So you do one, maybe two, maybe three retorquings. You can do the next retorquing is after maybe the first heat cycle, so you want to get to it fairly quickly. The second torquing you can do, maybe a few hundred miles later, and then you'd probably be okay there. But if you wanted to do a third one, I'd do it like maybe a year later,
Just go back and check.
just to double check. Now, if you're using, there are some aftermarket head gaskets out there, and you have to retorque maybe 15 times.
Oh.
Yeah. They're a lot of fun. I ran into a few of them, and I had one blow on me after 36 miles of running. So that's when I learned, what is going on here? Everything checked out fine and all, and then it was the material of the head gasket.
What,
So,
is it a sandwich gasket or a solid one?
It is,
ones that are bad.
they're also copper, and then they had some different type of filler than asbestos, and it's that
Some
filler.
environmentally safe.
Well, what it is the UK has a zero tolerance for asbestos. I
Yeah.
had to do all the research on this to figure out what was
Okay.
going on. So they have a zero tolerance for asbestos. So they can't have anything even remotely near. They can't do anything with. Whereas in this country, there's a tolerance for it. A lot of
Okay.
people don't realize that, and that's because in the mining industry, they found that they have to have asbestos. Oil rigs rely on asbestos, and they went back to the government and they said, if you can find something that's going to beat asbestos, we'll go with it.
Yeah.
But if you can't, then we have to have asbestos.
Right.
So as a result of that, there is somewhat of a tolerance. Nobody will tell you that because
But
they
you
don't
can
want to get sued for
maybe get a good
asbestos
gasket.
poisoning.
Australia won't even import cars, they won't allow it.
Well, yeah, it's becoming an
Unless you're
issue.
certified, yeah.
Because I have customers in Australia, and they're like, I'm going to bring a car in. How much asbestos is on it? And then so then I explained to them, well, the exhaust is wrapped with asbestos, the brakes have asbestos, the clutch has asbestos.
I understand they just can't bring them in. really?
Right.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Nothing at all?
Well,
Not unless
they'll
it's
tear
certified.
apart your car and then say there's asbestos here, and we're either going to keep the asbestos and get rid of it ourselves, and then we'll give you all the parts back, or you got to figure something else out. But we don't want this.
They don't just fine you, that's it.
No,
It's like pay a fine.
that'd be easy.
Wow, so if somebody's doing it and wants a, Concord level P3
Right.
or 2025, you got a problem because otherwise you're gonna get dinged for points if you have the wrong stuff on.
Well, for wrapping the exhaust, I use a fiberglass rope, and because I don't want to be around asbestos. I've known people who have it got to them.
And it's not a good.
And what's interesting is, they've done so much, the lawyers have worked so hard on it that, so I had a friend who was a bad smoker, and he died of asbestos lung poisoning. So I said, well, he's a bad smoker, And they said, oh, no, we figured out a way that we can determine that it was because the asbestos that killed him and not the smoking.
Oh, wow.
So so they've gotten that good with it. So
Have you tried the ceramic fiber wrap?
what I found is for clutches and brakes, I found a material that has Kevlar in place of asbestos, and that works really. It's actually better than what I was using before, and it looks a lot like the original. It still has the brass weave in it, and it doesn't make any noise. It's quiet. There's other lining material that looks a lot like that, and it has fiberglass. Well, that tends to be noisy. The fiberglass doesn't. Yeah, awful noise. I mean, the brakes will just. So yeah, so for those linings, the Kevlar stuff is good. The fiberglass rope for anything that has a heat thing. And then for the head gasket, I found a company, they're out in Oregon, and they're using asbestos, but it's embedded in the in rubber. And I'm not going to mention their name because they don't want me to. But so now their head gasket doesn't have the copper cladding, but it acts and behaves exactly like the originals did, and it works fine. And I retorqued 2 or 3 times and
So
never
it's
have a problem.
encapsulated in the rubber, I guess.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, but I still handle it carefully. And
These are the aftermarket bolts